Undercover boss hears a waitress crying. What happens next is unbelievable. Ethan Carter, a 45-year-old entrepreneur, was the founder and owner of Carter's Diner, a small chain of 13 locations spread across the state. Over 15 years ago, he had opened his first diner with the hope of creating a warm and welcoming space where customers could enjoy good food and employees could feel like part of a family. But lately, something felt off. Reports from his regional managers still painted a picture of smooth operations, but Ethan couldn't ignore the growing number of complaints from customers. Some mentioned slow service, rude staff, and an atmosphere that had lost its friendly charm. Even worse, employee turnover was at an all-time high. Ethan had always believed that his employees were the heart of his business, yet now it seemed like things were falling apart right under his nose. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan decided to visit one of his farthest locations, a diner in a small town about 120 miles from his corporate office. It wasn't too far to travel, but far enough that most employees there had never seen him in person. To make sure no one would recognize him, Ethan completely changed his appearance. He let his beard grow out, swapped his usual polished business attire for a worn-out hoodie and faded jeans, and traded his leather shoes for an old pair of sneakers. He even put on thick-rimmed glasses to disguise his sharp features that were often seen in company website photos. That afternoon, Ethan stepped into the diner, blending into the lively hum of customers chatting and the clinking of dishes. At first glance, the place wasn't terrible, but it didn't feel as inviting as he had once envisioned. The leather booths showed signs of wear, the lighting was slightly dim, and there was an underlying tension in the air that wasn't immediately obvious. He took a seat near the window, his eyes scanning the room with curiosity and concern. Within a minute, a young waitress approached. Her eyes looked tired, but she still managed a polite smile. The name tag on her uniform read, Emily. "Hi there. Welcome to Carter's Diner. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Her voice was cheerful, yet slightly strained. Ethan nodded and returned a small smile. "Just coffee, please." "Thanks." At that moment, he knew he was about to uncover the truth that no report could ever reveal. Ethan sat in his booth, slowly stirring his coffee as he observed the diner in action. The place was busy, but something felt off. The atmosphere wasn't warm or inviting, it was tense, almost mechanical. Employees moved with a sense of urgency, but there was no light-hearted chatter, no easy smiles. His eyes followed Emily as she weaved between tables, taking orders, refilling drinks, and clearing plates, all without missing a beat. She was efficient, but there was a heaviness in her movements, like she was running on fumes. Ethan noticed the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her shoulders tensed every time she passed the kitchen door. Then, the voice came. "Emily. What's taking so long? You're falling behind again." A harsh, booming voice cut through the noise of the diner. Ethan glanced toward the kitchen, where a stocky man in a grease-stained apron stood, arms crossed, scowling. Mike, Ethan guessed, the shift manager. The way he spoke, like he was more interested in barking orders than actually leading, made Ethan's jaw tighten. Emily flinched at the sound of his voice but quickly nodded, her voice strained. "Coming right up." She turned on her heel and rushed toward the kitchen, but Ethan didn't miss the slight tremble in her hands as she scribbled down another order. He clenched his coffee cup a little tighter. This wasn't right. As he waited for his food, Ethan overheard conversations from nearby tables. A family behind him whispered about how long they'd been waiting. Two teenagers at the counter exchanged glances and muttered something about the manager being a jerk to one of the waitresses earlier. The pattern was clear: customers weren't just waiting too long. They were noticing how miserable the staff seemed. Minutes later, Emily returned with his burger and fries, setting the plate down with an apologetic look. "Sorry for the wait," she said softly, avoiding eye contact. "No worries," Ethan replied, offering a reassuring smile. "You're doing great." For a brief moment, her eyes met his, surprised, almost like she wasn't used to hearing those words. Then, she quickly nodded and hurried off again. Ethan picked up his fork, ready to take his first bite, when he heard it. A muffled sob. Coming from the kitchen. He froze, his stomach twisting. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. "Emily." Ethan set his fork down and listened. "I'm trying my best, okay?" Her voice cracked through the thin walls. "I haven't had a break in 6 hours, and I'm doing everything I can." Mike's response was cold, dismissive. "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you're in the wrong job. We don't have time for excuses." That was it. Ethan slid out of the booth, his jaw tight, his pulse pounding. He had come here for answers. Now, he had them. And he wasn't about to sit back and do nothing. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pushed back from his booth, his half-eaten meal forgotten, and strode toward the kitchen. His heart pounded, his hands clenched at his sides. He had come here looking for answers, but now, he had seen enough. He wasn't going to sit back and let this continue. As he stepped through the swinging kitchen doors, he saw exactly what he expected: Emily, standing by the prep station, her hands shaking as she wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve. Across from her, Mike, the shift manager, stood with his arms crossed, his expression twisted with irritation. "I told you already, no time for breaks," Mike snapped. "If you can't handle the rush, that's not my problem." Ethan's blood boiled. He took a step forward, his voice calm but firm. "Is there a problem here?" Both Emily and Mike turned, startled. For the first time, Mike seemed to actually notice Ethan. He straightened up, eyes narrowing. "Who the hell are you?" Ethan ignored the question. Instead, he looked at Emily. She looked exhausted, like someone who had been running on fumes for far too long. "She looks like she needs a break," Ethan said evenly. "Why don't you let her sit down for a few minutes?" Mike scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Yeah? And who's gonna cover for her? We're already short-staffed. This is a diner, not a daycare." Ethan's jaw tightened. "There's always time to treat people with respect." A beat of silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Then, from behind the prep station, a voice spoke up. "She hasn't even had time to grab a drink of water." It was Connor, one of the line cooks, a wiry young man with nervous energy but a quiet resolve. His voice wavered slightly, but he stood his ground. Mike turned on him immediately. "Stay out of it, Connor. Focus on your station." Ethan's gaze flicked to Connor, then back to Mike. "And who's in charge of making sure your team can focus? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the pressure is coming from the way this place is being run." Mike's face flushed red. "Look, I'm just doing my job. If people can't handle it, that's not on me." Ethan took a step closer, his voice dropping to a steely tone. "We'll see about that." Emily wiped her eyes again, looking at Ethan with confusion and a flicker of something else: gratitude. Mike folded his arms. "I don't have time for this." Ethan let out a slow breath, then delivered the words that would change everything. "You might want to start making time. Because if I were your boss, this wouldn't fly." Mike scoffed. Yeah? Well, you're not my boss, so. Actually, I am. Ethan pulled out his wallet and flipped it open, revealing his Carter's Diner owner's ID. His name, Ethan Carter, was printed clearly in bold letters. The entire kitchen went silent. Emily froze mid-step. Connor's knife paused against the cutting board. Even the dishwashers in the back stopped moving. Mike's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, swallowing hard. Ethan took a step closer, lowering his voice so only Mike could hear. Let's talk. In the office. Now. Mike hesitated for a split second, then nodded stiffly, turning toward the back office. Ethan followed, pausing only once, to glance back at Emily. You're taking a break. Right now. For the first time all day, she didn't argue. Ethan turned and walked into the office, ready to do what had to be done. Ethan stood in the middle of the diner, his heart still pounding from the confrontation in the kitchen. The tension was thick, every eye in the room locked on him after he had revealed who he really was. Mike, the now former manager, had stormed out of the restaurant after being fired, his face pale with shock. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan took a deep breath, scanning the room. Emily stood near the counter, still frozen in place, her hands gripping a coffee pot like she didn't know what to do next. Connor, the young line cook who had dared to speak up earlier, peered cautiously from the kitchen. The rest of the staff looked hesitant, as if waiting for someone to tell them what happened next. That someone was him. All right, listen up, Ethan said, his voice firm but steady. I know today has been rough, but things are going to change around here, starting now. The tension in the room eased slightly, though uncertainty still lingered in the employees' eyes. Ethan wasn't just here to clean up a mess, he was here to fix it for good. He turned to Emily first. You've been carrying way too much weight on your shoulders, and that ends today. No more running yourself into the ground without a break. No more being treated like you're disposable. You matter, and I'm going to make sure this place treats you like it. Emily blinked, clearly taken aback. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Ethan assured her. I should have seen this sooner. Then, he looked at Connor. You spoke up when no one else did. That says a lot about your character. I need someone like you stepping up, not just covering for bad leadership. So, starting now, you're the new assistant manager. Connor's eyes widened. Me? But I've never. You've already been doing the job, Ethan interrupted. You just haven't had the title to go with it. Connor swallowed hard, nodding, his expression shifting from shock to determination. Ethan turned back to the rest of the staff. No more being short-staffed during peak hours. We're bringing in new hires. And we're making sure everyone gets proper breaks. You can't take care of customers if you're running on empty. A murmur of cautious hope spread through the room. For the first time in a long time, it felt like someone was actually listening. Ethan nodded. This isn't just talk. You'll see the changes. And if any of you ever feel like things are going back to the way they were, you come straight to me. For the first time since he'd walked into this diner, Ethan saw something new in their eyes. Relief. Hope. This was only the beginning. The diner was quieter now, the tension from earlier slowly fading, but Ethan knew his work was far from over. Firing Mike had been the first step, but real change, lasting change, was going to take more than just removing one bad manager. He had made promises to his team, and now, it was time to follow through. After the last customers left and the neon "open" sign flipped to "closed," Ethan sat in a booth near the back, motioning for Emily and Connor to join him. They hesitated for a moment, glancing at each other before finally sitting across from him. They both looked exhausted, but for the first time since he had arrived, there was something new in their expressions: hope. Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "All right, let's talk." His voice was steady but softer now. "I know today was rough. But you both handled yourselves with professionalism and care. That's more than I can say for some of the leadership this place has had." Emily glanced at Connor, unsure how to respond. Connor fidgeted with the hem of his apron. "I didn't know things had gotten this bad," Ethan admitted, his jaw tightening. "That's on me. I built this company to be a place where people feel valued, employees and customers. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that." Emily hesitated, then finally spoke. "It's not all bad," she said cautiously. "I mean, I've worked worse jobs. But it's been hard. I love the customers, I really do. I just wish," she trailed off, biting her lip. Ethan leaned in slightly. "Wish what?" She exhaled, finally letting the words out. "I just wish it felt like someone cared. Like, really cared about us, not just the numbers, not just how fast we can turn tables." Ethan nodded, letting her words sink in. Then, he turned to Connor. "What about you?" Connor swallowed before speaking, his voice quiet but firm. "Honestly, I didn't plan on staying long. But I couldn't leave, not with how much Emily and the others have to deal with. Someone had to have their backs." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. These two had been holding this place together while he had been sitting in an office, trusting reports and spreadsheets. That changed now. "Well, that ends today," Ethan said firmly. "And I'm not just going to tell you things will get better, I'm going to show you." Emily and Connor exchanged glances, curiosity and skepticism flickering in their eyes. "Here's what's going to happen," Ethan continued. "First, we're bringing in a new manager. Someone with experience, but more importantly, someone who knows how to lead with respect." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean you're staying?" Ethan nodded. "For as long as it takes." Connor tilted his head. "And Mike?" "He's not coming back," Ethan said simply. "I don't tolerate that kind of behavior, and neither should you." Connor let out a small breath of relief, while Emily's shoulders sagged, as if a weight had been lifted. "Second," Ethan continued, "we're fixing the staffing issue. No more running on fumes during peak hours. We're hiring more people, and I'll make sure everyone gets proper breaks. You can't take care of customers if you're barely staying on your feet." A small, cautious smile crossed Emily's face. "That would be amazing." Ethan nodded, then turned to Connor. "And you? You've shown leadership even when no one asked you to. Starting today, you're the new assistant manager." Connor's jaw dropped. "Wait, are you serious? I've never managed anything before." Ethan smirked. "You're already doing it. You just haven't had the title." Connor blinked, clearly stunned. I don't know what to say." "Thank you." Ethan turned to Emily next. "And you, 8 months of dedication, even when things were at their worst? That doesn't go unnoticed. Starting next week, you're getting a significant raise. And I want to set up a bonus system so hard work like yours gets recognized." Emily's hand flew to her mouth, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh my God, really?" Ethan nodded. "Really. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of his words settled in. Then, Emily whispered, "Thank you. I mean it. Thank you." Ethan exhaled, his expression softening. "You've earned it." As they finished talking, Ethan laid out his vision for improving the diner, updating equipment, implementing better scheduling, holding regular staff meetings. By the time they got up from the booth, both Emily and Connor looked lighter, as if they had finally been given permission to breathe. This wasn't just about fixing one bad manager. This was about making things right, for good. What do you think? If you were in Ethan's shoes, how would you have handled the situation? Have you ever worked in a place where bad management made everything harder? Or maybe you've had a boss who actually stepped up and made a difference. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your experiences, whether it's a workplace struggle, a moment where leadership truly mattered, or just your take on Ethan's decisions. Let's talk about what real leadership looks like.